Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're tackling something pretty much everyone deals with at some point. We're talking about anxiety, and to help us out, we'll be using Outwit Anxiety
Oh, a great choice.
by Rick Schnabel.
Yeah.
Now, he's also known as Australia's brain untrainer, which I think is a pretty cool title.
Right.
But before we dive in, I think it's super important to mention this deep dive isn't meant to replace any professional help. If you're really struggling, please reach out to a qualified mental health expert.
Yes, absolutely. It's so important to remember that. This is more about exploring some practical techniques and ideas that might be helpful alongside, any professional support you might be getting.
For sure, for sure. Okay, so one of the things that really stood out to me about Schnabel's approach is that he doesn't see anxiety as some kind of personality defect,
Right.
He sees it as a learned pattern, which I find really empowering because it means we can unlearn it or at least retrain our brains to respond differently.
Yeah, totally. He emphasizes that anxiety is basically our brain's way of trying to protect us. But it kind of goes overboard sometimes, like a guard dog that barks at every little thing.
Okay, so our brain is basically misinterpreting things, seeing threats where there aren't any.
Exactly. Like it might be drawing on past experiences that aren't even relevant anymore, and that's where that whole brain untrainer thing comes in.
So it's all about rewiring those responses.
Well, he has a bunch of techniques, but one of the simplest is his 5-minute anxiety reduction method.
Okay, sounds intriguing.
Which is like a quick tool you can use anywhere to kind of bring your anxiety down.
All right, I'm ready. Walk me through it.
So first, you got to figure out where you're at right now.
Okay.
He uses this scale from 0 to 100.
Okay.
0 being like totally zen and 100 being full-on panic attack.
Right. So listeners, take a second and think, where are you on that scale right now? Really tune in to how you're feeling physically too. Maybe your heart's racing a bit. Maybe your palms are sweaty.
Yeah, exactly. Just notice what's going on without any judgment. Once you've got a number in mind, the first step is to try and shift your focus to the present moment.
Okay, so we're talking about letting go of worrying about the future or dwelling on the past.
Exactly. It's all about just bringing your attention to what's happening right here, right now.
Like hitting the pause button on all that mental chatter.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the next step is deep, slow breathing.
Ah, the classic deep breathing. I've definitely heard about that before. But I'm curious, why does it work so well for calming anxiety? What's the science behind it?
Okay, so when we're anxious, our sympathetic nervous system kicks in, right? It's like our body's getting ready to fight or flee, even if the danger is just like a deadline or something.
Right, like that whole fight or flight response.
Exactly. But deep, slow breathing, think like a 6-second inhale hold for a moment. 6-second exhale, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is all about rest and relaxation.
So it's like we're telling our body, it's cool, you can chill out now.
Pretty much. And this is where it gets even more interesting. The last step is actually about posture.
Oh, okay, posture. I mean, I know good posture can make you look more confident, but does it really change how you feel on the inside?
It totally can. Think about it. When you're anxious, you tend to slouch, make yourself small, right?
Oh, yeah, like a human question mark.
Exactly. But Schnabel says that if you consciously adjust your posture, straighten your spine, lift your chest, even a little chin lift, it can actually signal to your brain that you're more in control.
So we're kind of tricking our brain into feeling more confident.
It's not really tricking. It's more like creating a feedback loop.
Interesting.
Your physical state can influence your emotional state.
Okay, so to recap the 5-minute technique,
Yeah.
focus on the present moment, deep breathing, and posture adjustment.
Exactly. Easy peasy. Now, listeners, I want you to actually try this. After these 3 steps, check back in with that anxiety scale. Did anything change?
And even if it didn't budge much, don't worry. This is a skill you build up over time.
Yeah, it's like working a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger it gets.
Yeah.
And the best part is you can use it anytime, anywhere.
Okay, that's awesome. So we've got this technique, but I also want to understand more about the why. You mentioned the nervous system. What else is happening in our brains and bodies when we feel anxious? And how does Schnabel's approach address that?
Well, Schnabel talks a lot about how anxiety often comes from, our thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
All those like negative thoughts and worries that can spiral out of control. He actually calls them ANTs.
That's ANTs.
Automatic negative thoughts.
Okay, ANTs, I like that. It's like little pesky thoughts that can really get to you.
Exactly. And just like real ants, they can multiply like crazy if you let them. But the thing is, he says our thoughts aren't always, an accurate picture of reality.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So our thoughts are kind of telling us a story, but that story might not be true.
Right. Our past experiences, our fears, even just feeling anxious in the moment can distort things.
I see.
So part of his approach is about learning to challenge those ANTs, like really question them,
Oh, okay.
see if they're actually based on facts or just our anxiety talking.
So it's almost like fact-checking our own thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of just accepting those anxious thoughts, you can pause and say, hold on, is this really true? What evidence do I have?
Right, right. Does that actually help, though? Like, just recognizing that a thought might not be true?
It can. It's like you're shining a light on those ANTs and they scurry away.
Makes sense.
But Schnabel takes it a step further. He also talks about replacing those negative thoughts with more positive or realistic ones.
So it's not just about suppressing the bad stuff. It's about cultivating good thoughts, too.
Exactly. He calls it thought swapping. So instead of thinking, I'm going to totally bomb this presentation, you could try thinking, I've prepared for this, I can do a good job.
Oh, okay. So challenging those ANTs, swapping them out. What else can we do to, like, build up our resilience to anxiety over time?
That's where self-care comes in.
Okay, right, yeah.
Schnabel really emphasizes taking care of our physical and mental well-being. Things like getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, exercise, and doing stuff that brings you joy and relaxation.
So it's like building up this reserve of strength to draw from when those anxious feelings hit.
Exactly. And this is something people often forget when they're struggling with anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
They focus so much on managing the symptoms, they forget to address the root causes.
Right, like putting a Band-Aid on a wound without cleaning it first.
Exactly. So by taking care of yourself, you're creating a better environment for your mental health, which in turn helps you handle the anxiety.
I see, I see.
And this leads to another interesting point Schnabel makes.
Okay.
He believes anxiety isn't something we need to, completely eliminate.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, he sees it as a totally normal human emotion that can actually be helpful sometimes.
Helpful. How can anxiety be helpful? It always feels so negative.
Well, think about it. Anxiety is basically our body's alarm system. It's letting us know about potential threats, which can push us to take action, be prepared.
Right, okay.
The problem is when that alarm goes off too easily or too loudly. And that's where the techniques we've been talking about come in.
So it's not about becoming some fearless Zen master. It's more about managing anxiety, using it as information rather than letting it take over.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance where anxiety helps you instead of holding you back.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. We've covered so much today. We've talked about anxiety as a learned pattern.
Right.
We explored Schnabel's 5-minute technique, the power of challenging negative thought, self-care. What does this all mean for our listeners out there who might be struggling with anxiety in their own lives?
I think the main thing is you've got more control than you might realize. It's not about, never feeling anxious again. More about understanding where it comes from and having tools to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. I really like that Schnabel focuses on making people like active participants in their own mental health.
Yeah.
He doesn't just give you a list of rules. He gives you ways to understand your anxiety and come up with your own strategies.
Like you become your own anxiety detector. Figuring out your triggers, what sets you off, and then having a game plan.
Exactly. And it's important to remember it's a journey, right? It's going to have its ups and downs. Some days are better than others. Oh, absolutely. Like with anything new, it takes practice. You got to be patient with yourself. And sometimes you need a little extra help, maybe a therapist, friend, even a good book.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of books, I think one of the best things about Schnabel's book is that it's hopeful. He really emphasizes that, anxiety isn't a life sentence. It's something you can learn to manage and maybe even use to your advantage.
That's so important because it can feel so overwhelming, like it takes over everything.
Yeah.
But knowing there are things you can do makes a huge difference.
It really does. And even little changes can make a big impact. Remember that 5-minute technique. Just a few minutes of focusing on your breath, adjusting your posture, can help break that anxiety cycle.
It's like hitting a reset button for your whole system.
Yeah. And the more you practice, the easier it gets.
Exactly. So, listener, as we wrap up here, think about this. What are those everyday things that trigger your anxiety? Maybe it's traffic, a big presentation at work, even just making a phone call. Whatever it is, how can you use what we talk about today to handle those situations better?
Could you try those deep breaths before walking into a meeting? What about visualizing yourself doing well? Or swapping out a negative thought for a more positive one?
Remember, even small steps are a big deal. It's all about taking back control, realizing you don't have to let anxiety rule your life.
That's right. And most importantly, be kind to yourself. This is a journey, not a race. Celebrate the progress you make, learn from any setbacks, and don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it.
You got this. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep questioning.
See you in the next deep dive.